radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. It is October 28th. It's 8 a.m. in the morning, and I am super excited this morning. On Wednesdays, as you know, we do interviews here with activists, and I have the great honor today of speaking with Donna Gilmore, who really runs the website santanofresafety.org, a citizen activist who has really made a monumental change in helping Southern California stay safe. Donna's on the line. Are you with us, Donna?
Yes, I'm right here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, thank you for being on. I'm really excited. One of the things that really fascinates me about your work is that if anybody goes to your page, and I encourage everyone listening to go to your page and look at it, honestly, it is one of the best, most chock full of real information of how the issues that really, really matter in terms of making us safe from the harm that the nuclear industry is doing to us. So I wanted to ask you a few things first about how did you get engaged in this? How long have you been an activist in the stopping the San Onofre nuclear power plant?
Well, I think of myself as a late blooming activist. I was just a few years ago, I was naive enough to think that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was doing their job and overseeing these nuclear utilities to make sure they were keeping us safe. Then I mistakenly thought that the utility companies would reward employees for finding and fixing safety problems. Instead, just reading in the local newspaper that Southern California Edison was actually firing employees who reported safety problems to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Wow. That was being reported in the regular newspaper?
Yes, it had made it in the regular newspaper, and there was a local activist, Gary Hedrick, who was quoted in the story, and apparently some employees at the plant, whistleblowers, they didn't know who to turn to, so they were sending him secret information about what was going on at San Onofre. And then he didn't know what to do with it. I mean, they tell the NRC, and then they would be found out even if they reported things anonymously. And then the NRC ended up siding with Edison on legitimate issues. Wow. So anyway, so I contacted Gary Hedrick, got involved there, attended my first Nuclear Regulatory Commission meeting. I was in disbelief. I said, oh, maybe these are just disgruntled employees. I could not imagine that safety issues would be ignored. I mean, it was beyond my comprehension that you're making the most dangerous, most toxic material on Earth that could basically annihilate all of us and cause us to have to leave our homes permanently. And it's just unconscionable. So I went to the first meeting, and actually Edison acknowledged that they've had what they call a quote unquote a safety problem, safety issues, or safety work problems with their safe work environment. Employees were afraid to report problems. Gee whiz, I wonder why.
Wow.
One member of the audience, a former San Onofre employee, who's an electrical engineer, he got up and spoke as a member of the public and said that there were circuit breakers that would never pop at San Onofre. So they had circuit breakers that were the wrong size, so that wiring overheated, they'd have a fire before they would even know. And he had reported this to Edison, and they wouldn't fix it. So he eventually reported it to the NRC, and then they came after him to get rid of him.
Wow.
And it's all about money. It's all about money over safety with this nuclear industry. I had no idea to what degree that was true. I managed to connect with that employee. He walked out of the meeting. He was afraid to talk to me. He said he was just nervous and everything, but he felt, hey, my family lives here. I have to do something. So, and the NRC eventually cited the Southern California Edison for this issue. So he was validated at that point. This was a real issue, but he basically had to take an early retirement because they were coming after him to fire him. So,
wow.
And that's the reality.
Did they end up fixing the problem?
We don't know. The NRC gave them what's called a non-cited violation. A non-cited violation means they're supposed to fix the problem, but they don't have to document it. They don't have to tell the NRC. The NRC doesn't come and inspect. What? And we to this day do not know if they ever fixed it. Now it's a moot point because the plant is permanently shut down because what they did at San Onofre is they had to replace their steam generators. This was almost $1 billion to replace these steam generators. And they changed the design of the generators and did such a bad job that they leaked radiation. One of them leaked radiation just after 1 year of installation. And when they investigated, they found out that all 4 of the steam generators had decades of wear already after 1 and 2 years of service. But Edison was going to restart San Onofre anyway, even with these problems. And so we got very active locally. And what we found worked. These are just local citizens, local concerned citizens that knew the facts. And what we did locally, we found that if we went to city council, it's hard to get press on this. It's hard to get media attention. These utility companies, they pay for ads and newspapers and
there's all kinds of things. Exactly.
Yeah, so it's hard to get press. But what I noticed from that NRC meeting that I went to, the only person that got quoted in the news article was our local San Clemente mayor. They quoted her. So I thought, well, wait a minute. If we can get these cities involved and educated, get them to pass some resolutions, and then maybe we can get some press and get the word out about this and get cities involved and kind of, because we didn't have any money. And we live in Southern California, but not everybody that lives in Southern California has money. So
right. I used to live there. I know. I share your sentiment. I know that exactly. So.
Right. So and then Edison gives out misinformation. They give out misinformation. So I started working with Gary Hedrick and some other people that were involved. I started looking for, well, where's the California or the Southern California? Where are all the groups that are on this issue? There were none in Southern California at all. It was a non-issue. There was nobody. So we were it.
Yeah,
We
you know
were
what?
it.
I think I told you this. I lived in Southern California my entire life. I've been in Eugene now for 10 years, but all of my life I lived in Southern California in Los Angeles, like all over the LA basin. The last place I lived was in Redondo Beach, and my family's in San Diego. So I would traverse down and back and forth on the 405 freeway. I never once realized San Onofre was a nuclear power plant. I actually thought it was an observatory for the military. I thought it was a U.S. naval observatory. It looks like it to me. It's round and circular. So and I will tell you what, you hear nothing about a nuclear power plant in Southern California. Nothing.
No, and they have no warning sign. It's right by the beach, and the nuclear plants are allowed to dump radioactive materials into the ocean. You know, that just to run a nuclear plant, you have to release some of that radiation just by the nature of how nuclear plants work. Right. There's no notice ahead of time when they're doing it. They only have to provide annual reports after the fact.
Wow.
I personally met with 2 NRC chairmen. There's 5 NRC commissioners that basically control our future when it comes to nuclear. They're appointed by the president, but they have to be confirmed by the Senate. So what's happened is you usually get 4 out of 5 that are pro-nuke and only 1 token that's more concerned with safety than industry profits. That's how it's been working.
Well, their mandate, if you read what they say, their mandate only talks about, even the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, their only motive is profit. Their secondary motive is to be public advocates and safety but their first primary thing is profit and money.
Well, that's the IAEA, but the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, their primary goal is supposed to be safety. Okay, but that has been corrupted, and the people that get promoted into management at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, if you don't play nice with the nuclear industry, that's a career limiting event at the NRC. And I have a section on my website.
I saw that.
One of the issues deals with NRC problems, and there was a really good AP Wire study that was done talking about the whole issue, the problems within the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But what I have found useful is to listen in to NRC technical meetings, because they have some good technical people at the NRC. The working level. I've worked in a bureaucracy before, which really gives me an edge on knowing how these things work and how much authority you really have as a worker in government versus, and what happens at the different management levels. So I have a kind of a better understanding than a lot of people, which has been very helpful here. So usually the working level engineers, they're going to be the honest ones. They're going to tell the truth. And the NRC has public meetings that hardly anybody ever listens to, that where you can learn exactly where the problems are and what they're doing about it.
Right. It's actually been stunning. I'm with you on that. I've listened to them, and it is shocking. I'm always stunned at the lack of just plain humanity that these people have. They really. Yeah.
So the thing is, let me just step back a minute. Why should people get involved? I mean, people feel like, well, there's nothing I can do, and I don't want to hear about it, and I just want to hope for the best. I mean, I'm too busy, whatever. I want to get through exactly why people need to care about this and why we're on a short deadline that they need to care. Number one is, one of those technical meetings I listened into, what I learned is the storage canisters that they're putting the waste in the United States. This isn't going on in other countries. It's mainly the United States is the problem here. The canisters they're putting the spent fuel in, this highly radioactive nuclear waste, and there's almost 2,000 of these installed around the United States. They're putting them in mainly half-inch thick stainless steel that I learned last year in a July NRC meeting can crack all the way through in about 17 to 20 years. And they don't have a plan to deal with it. And they have no technology to even find out if there are cracks or how deep the cracks are. So the NRC is approving canisters to store this. Each canister contains more cesium-137, which is extremely dangerous, than was released at the Chernobyl blast.
Each canister.
Each canister.
And yes, and 1,000 of them. You said.
This sounds unbelievable, and because so much of this is unbelievable, what I insist on the San Onofre Safety website is that every fact has a link. You will find a link to these facts. If I say that there's cesium-137, greater than what was released at Chernobyl, I've got a chart and a report that links that you can go read for yourself.
Donna, I want to stop you here. Your website is freaking awesome. It is really, really the most comprehensive, best website of anybody who wants to get the truth out about nuclear that I have ever seen. Honestly, the links that you have here, the stories that you have are mind-boggling, and it's not. Interestingly enough, your focus is on San Onofre, but really what you do is cover the entire nuclear NRC. In the United States, you cover their deficiencies, and it really does tie it in. At least when I was playing around with your website, I honestly was blown away. The information, just the average activist, citizen activist like myself who's been engaged in this, the information and the links that you have that are directly related to government information, it's there. That's the shocking thing. The information is there, but nobody's picking up the ball and demanding, wait a minute, you guys are literally 2,000 casts that are a half an inch thick that we know will start cracking 17. How old are the casts, these 2,000 casts? What's the average time frame that are in use?
It varies. Most are less than about 15 years. I know you're in Oregon, and I was just looking. I actually read inspection reports from the NRC. So Columbia Generating Station is the closest plant to you.
Right.
They've been loading canisters there since 2002. And you have what's called a Holtec High Storm 100 is the model. This is one of the most common canisters out there all over the country. Most of them in the United States are about this thick. Now these canisters, the cracking, no one knows exactly when a crack will start. I was told by an NRC manager, Donna, if you could determine when a crack would initiate, you'd probably win a Nobel Prize. They don't know when it will start. What they do know is what the conditions are where these canisters would be susceptible to cracking. And the NRC and their stress corrosion cracking experts have determined that these canisters that have been used throughout the United States are subject to stress corrosion cracks. And there's certain environmental factors that can increase the odds something's going to go wrong. For example, at San Onofre, we're right by the ocean, and salts from the ocean can start the corrosion process with these canisters. And there's a Coburg nuclear plant in South Africa that has a component. It's a tank. It doesn't hold the nuclear fuel, but it's made the same way. And the NRC considers this the closest operating experience we have as to what could happen to us. And this tank had a leak in 17 years. And it was thicker than these half-inch thick canisters. And in 17 years, it had a crack that went all the way through it. and the container leaked. Fortunately, it doesn't have nuclear waste. Now, are any of the canisters in the United States leaking? Nobody friggin' knows, because they do not have a way to find cracks in canisters filled with spent nuclear fuel. If you didn't have nuclear fuel inside, the typical way you inspect a stainless steel container would be to put a fluid dye inside and see where it runs. But you can't do that with canisters filled with spent nuclear fuel. And these canisters are so thin, employees can't get next to them to even check the outside of them, because they would be radiated. The canisters have to be stored inside these big concrete casks. And
oh my God!
Because they're the thin canisters don't protect from gamma rays, and they don't protect from neutrons, so they have to put them inside these thick concrete casks. The problem is those thick casks have vent holes to the outside air, and they have to have that because the fuel is so hot that the canister would overheat if they didn't have some air vents to the environment. So what you have is these half-inch thick canisters that could have through-wall cracks in as little as 17 years, and convection cooling will allow basically that radiation that leaks out to be the gaseous radionuclides to be released into the environment, and we won't know until after they leak, because they have no early warning monitoring system to know if these things are getting ready to leak. They have none. To make matters work, now Columbia is using Holtec. Now we had Holtec president, Dr. Chris Singh, attend one of our a Edison public meeting, and we have him on the video saying that it's not feasible, even if you could find the cracks, it's not feasible to repair them. He said, in the face of millions of curies of radiation, to try it. So from even a microscopic crack, you will have millions of curies of radiation coming out from even a microscopic crack. And then if you were still able to, say, remotely, robotically, to repair the cracks, just because of the nature of stainless steel, you will actually create a rough surface, which will actually be a rough surface is a trigger for another crack. So for all intents and purposes, these are not repairable. And we managed to get that on video, and I posted it on the homepage of Stand Up for Safety. So you can see the president of the company that makes these canisters say you can't repair them,
So what's their plan? Do they plan on putting them inside? Like, we can't change them out. Do they plan on is this the idea that they're going to take the canisters that might crack in 15 years? Like up here in Columbia Generating Station, we're going on 13 years, which means we've got 5 years or less before they start. It'll likely take, once a crack starts, and we don't know exactly when they will start. There's a lot of sulfites from industrial and vehicle pollution will trigger the corrosion process. There's various things that will trigger the corrosion process. And so it's hard to predict when it will start, but let's assume for a minute that the covert was kind of a worst case. So let's say 17 years. But they're licensed for 20 years. These canisters are all licensed for 20 years. And I have written public comments when the NRC goes to improve new canister designs. I've written public comments during the public comment period when they're ready to approve a new canister design or a change. And I've done this 3 times, and every time they have pulled the approval from the federal. They had it posted in the Federal Register. If we don't hear any serious comments in 30 days, this is approved. And I've managed to make public comments, and they've actually yanked them from approval. They eventually approved them, but I've been able to get some things in writing. For example, on the latest Holtec approval, when I brought up the issue of the cracking and no repair technology and all this,
they said, oh, well, for the initial 20 license, anything that might happen to these after 20 years is out of scope. So we don't even consider any aging issues with these canisters.
What?
We're certifying them for 20 years. Anything past that might happen past that is out of scope.
What? That is so...
I have that in writing, the NRC approval for the Holtec, High Storm, UMAC system. They responded to the majority of my comments in their approval, okay? And so I have a number of these unbelievable statements in there. Also, they're not, this is a license. They license it for storage, but not for transport. There's a different set of regulations for storage than for transport. So they are approving canisters for storage that haven't been evaluated to determine if they will be transportable. And if you look at the transport regulations, one of the transport regulations says you can't transport canisters that have cracks.
So what is there? Have you ever, like, what is their plan? This is astounding information that we have over 2,000 of these casts around the country. It's not just San Onofre. It sounds like it's at every single nuclear site in the United States. They're planning on a disaster.
Yeah, it is. And that is why, I was supposed to be retired. I was supposed to, after working hard, my wife, I was supposed to be, okay, I'll finally get to take those vacations I always had to put off, And this was supposed to be a retirement, but because of what I found out, first it was with the nuclear plant at San Onofre, and that's why the website is named San Onofre Safety, because of the problems I saw happening in the operating plant, but after the plant was shut down, and that's another story I could give you a little bit of details on, but after it was shut down with a lot of effort by the local citizens, I said, well, wait a minute, if Edison has done such a horrible job of managing his operating plant, before I think about doing any home improvements or remodeling on my house, I better see how they're managing that waste. So after the plant was shut down, I decided to learn about nuclear waste. Now, if you had told me that I was going to have any interest in knowing anything about nuclear waste, I would tell you you were crazy. I have absolutely no interest in learning anything about that. I mean, I'm a retired IT manager. I did systems analysis. I designed computer systems for different, operations and things, come in and figure out how to automate processes, and ran a major computer center, developed one of the key team members to develop an employment history payroll system for the state of California. So I worked on some pretty good projects, worked with some political types also. But so I dug into, I have a background in knowing how to research, and so I took those skills and I started learning about what was going on at San Onofre with the waste. And my website is really focused now on the problems with nuclear waste. They have in this country in particular, we have the worst system for storing nuclear waste, and nobody's dealing with it. I've been in the odd position of actually educating activists, educating nuclear physicists, educating nuclear engineers, material engineers. When I speak to some material engineers, there was one particular who worked on Yucca Mountain, trying to come up with, what kind of material should we use to contain this waste at Yucca Mountain that we're going to bury deep in the ground for thousands and thousands of years. And when I told them they were using stainless steel next to the ocean, half-inch thick stainless steel, he said, "You got to be kidding me." He had no idea. He said, "Why would anybody do that?" And because salt air is highly corrosive to stainless steel, it's not going to hold up.
Why do they do it? That's a really good question.
They do it because it's cheaper. It's always about the money with these nuclear plants. And at the time, this what I call thin canister technology it came into play. Prior to this coming about, they were using thick metal calves, 10 to 20 inches thick. This is what they use in the rest of the world, even at Fukushima. They have, there's really not too much to choose from. There's two main, there's three companies that make the thin cast technology, and then there's two main companies that make the thick cast technology. The thick casts they're either about 10 inches thick versus a half inch.
Wow.
Or almost 20 inches thick. The Germans use a ductile cast iron that's almost 20 inches thick, and they have double bolted lids on them. They have monitoring, so you know if there's any chance of a seal leak or anything like that, you'll know way ahead of time. So you just replace the seal if there's a problem with the seal. They don't crack.
Wow.
They don't have a cracking problem.
How long do they last? How long do the thickness last?
Well, they've been in use over 40 years, and so you can look at the ones that have been used over 40 years and see that they really haven't degraded. It hasn't, for the first 40 years they've held up. Now the Germans and the French. The Riva is the French brand, TN24, the ones that they use at Fukushima, and that's the ones the French use. They actually store them in buildings for additional environmental protection. And they have remote monitoring, very clean environment, so you don't have contaminants. Anyway, I have a whole.
Why is there such a difference? Have you figured out why? I mean, that sounds a stark, glaring difference. We have the NRC who basically rubber stamps the cheapest, the worst things possible, and yet in the European market, there seems to be some modicum of at least an effort at safety there.
Well, I think in Germany, it's the government that's making the decision about what to use. Here, it's the profit-making nuclear plants.
Uh-huh.
That's the difference. Uh-huh. So, it's really
it's the tail wagging the dog here. Really, that's really what happens.
And at the time. The prices were a lot cheaper for the thin steel canisters back when they first started this. I think they were at least 2.5, 3 times as expensive to get the thick ones. Now, currently, steel prices versus the ductile cast iron, the prices are different, so the price spread isn't the same. But I'm actually what they call intervening in the California Public Utility Commission because the Edison gets the money to buy canisters from the Public Utility Commission. The Public Utility Commission has to approve them. And the Public Utility Commission has jurisdiction over cost. No state has jurisdiction over radiation. The laws have been set up so that the states actually have no authority at all for anything to do with radiation.
What?
So they only do, yes. So, it's called preemption. The laws have been fixed, yes. And this is where a lot of activists run into trouble. They try and go into their state and try and get help from the state based on radioactive release risks. You can't do that and win. You'll get sued and you will lose. It's that simple. So when you're dealing with the state, you have to know, okay, what legal authority does this state agency have? And if you go in there and try and bring up all the effects of radiation, they can't do anything even if they wanted to based on that. And there has been legal cases. It's gone all the way to the Supreme Court, and the states have lost every time they've tried this. And that is one of the hard things for activists to understand, that they can't go there. So what I'm doing at the California Public Utility Commission, and Edison is continually trying to throw out my case, but so far the judge is not doing that. I'm going in there with a cost basis, because these canisters that they've chosen, even though the utility companies, they get to choose what they want to buy to store the waste, I'm going in saying, hey, the state has requirements, and one of them is cost. And you're buying canisters that are known to be susceptible to cracking, and NRC evidence has shown that these cracks, particularly near an ocean, they could fail in 17 years, and that's through-wall cracks. That's cracks that go all the way through the wall. And we would have to replace those canisters, and that's an additional cost, and that additional cost needs to be taken into consideration. So we're ensured that Edison is doing a good cost-benefit analysis for the ratepayers.
That is really, bravo to you, Donna, for thinking of that. Bravo, because really you're beating them up with their own rules. But let me get back to this salient point here of states have no rights over nuclear safety. Is that what you're saying? That in Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or who made these rules that states can't make any decisions about nuclear safety? Where did that come from?
They have to be passed. You're talking federal law. You're talking, how does any federal law get passed? You have senators and you have your legislators that pass bills, and you have a president that signs, and then you have the option to override so that's what you have.
That all comes from Congress, when the energy committees on Congress, the ones that make these decisions about the nuclear industry, somewhere in that process, they created these laws that say the states have no authority over the radiation effects of their own citizens. Well,
you have bills that get introduced by senators, bills that get introduced by your Congress people, and that's how it starts.
Wow.
And then this is what I find and what I found is you think, okay, everything's about money and political corruption. I made that assumption that it's totally about money,
Right.
But what I have learned is that these nuclear industry, the nuclear lobbyists, the utility lobbyists, they are not telling the truth. They are misleading our elected officials. They are misleading our regulators about the safety of the nuclear reactors and nuclear waste storage. And they've done an excellent job of that. And unfortunately, even some of the activist engineers and scientists have also been misled.
Can you give me an example of that when you say that? Because that's a pretty big statement to say, that the NRC...
Yes, okay. All right. For example, let's see, which one should I choose from? Okay, well, let's take high burnup fuel. All right. High burnup, the nuclear utilities have doubled the amount of time that they keep the uranium pellets, which is the fuel for nuclear. They double the amount of time that they keep them in the reactor before they consider them used up, before they consider them burned up, okay? And so when they used to okay, I don't want to get too technical here, so I'm trying to do this without getting too technical. So when they burn this fuel longer in the reactor, what happens is that you end up with highly radioactive nuclear waste that's over twice as radioactive and over twice as thermally hot than what they used to use. And these uranium pellets are put in rods and metal made out of a zirconium alloy. And what they're finding is with this high burn-up fuel, it's causing the protective cladding, the zirconium cladding, to become brittle, where it can shatter like glass.
Wow.
And I apparently learned this, and others that probably should have known, didn't know this. What everyone was told is when they started using high burn-up fuel, what they were told is it's just the same as low burn-up fuel. The only difference is that you need to cool it, a couple of more years in the pools. After you take it out of the reactor, you put it in these pools of water, kind of like the big swimming pools, they're like 30 feet underwater.
Right.
And they have to cool for a number of years before you can take them and put them in the canisters, the dry storage canisters, okay? Right. And what they told everybody is the only difference is they just need to cool a couple of more years. So when I got involved in this, high burn-up was, okay, well, you have high burn-up fuel, which most people didn't even know what that was, but the ones that did, they believed this. Just 2 more years, and that's the only difference, okay? Well, what I learned by researching is that's not true. And I found evidence from NRC's website, documents there, other scientific documents. I found tons of evidence showing that they have this brittlement issue. And the higher the burn-up, the worse it is. Now, Per Peterson, I was referred by the governor's office to talk to Per Peterson. He knows everything about this stuff. Just talk to him, Donna. So Per Peterson is a UC Berkeley nuclear engineer. He works at the university. And he was on President Obama's Blue Ribbon Commission on what to do with nuclear waste. Okay? And he came down to one of our public meetings, and he made a statement that, well, once you put the waste in dry storage, nothing's going to go wrong. This is what he said. Nothing's going to go wrong. It's totally safe. No problem. And subsequent to that, and that wasn't true, okay? But he truly didn't know that wasn't true, all right? This is what he believed. I don't know where he gets his information, but that's what he believed. So Marvin Resnikoff, who is a nuclear physicist and one of the ones that knows this stuff, he doesn't know about this stuff. I worked with him, and we co-wrote a paper on high burn-up fuel. Anyway, he was on an email stream with Per Peterson where Per was telling a reporter here this information, and Marvin Resnikoff emailed him back, said it wasn't true, and CC'd me. So then I did a reply all to this email list, and I put in a link to the document, the scientific document, showing about the embrittlement issue after it's in dry storage.
Right.
And I put in a key quote in the email specifically stating it. And Per wrote back, and he said, "You're right, Donna." So I got this Blue Ribbon Commission, Obama Blue Ribbon Commission person that our California, governor's office is endorsing as the expert I need to talk to, saying, "You're right, Donna, that, the fuel can degrade after it's in dry storage."
Did he not know that, or did he just ignore that?
No, well, he didn't know it, but he, part of the problem is I don't want to get too technical here, but part of the problem, one of the problems is the drying, the temperature that this fuel is dried at before they put it in dry storage. And he was thinking, there must be a solution to this. So, he's still in he agreed with me, and he says, there must be a solution to this, so I'll look into it, but he never did.
Wow.
He never looked into it.
Wow.
What I find with these people is we have another one at UC San Diego. He's not a nuclear professor.
Do you need to talk to your little dog? Do you want to talk to her?
Yeah, I'll hold on a second. Just get her shut down. I had to shut the door.
That's all right. For you.
Yeah. I have a new puppy, so
it's cute.
I try and balance my life so it's not all negative, because the negative stuff can get you down. So I know.
It's all excited.
So, but and this UC San Diego professor, David Victor, I worked with him on this nuclear waste issue, and I would give him the facts, I would send him the links, everything, and what they do is their mind just selectively ignores facts that don't fit what they want to believe. This is what I'm finding. You know,
do you think it's that they're threatened? They know they understand consciously that if they really take what we're giving them, the real facts of the information, that their jobs, their livelihoods are going to be threatened. I mean, this is the only thing I can think of is these people are willing to be complicit and compliant and be coerced because they think, the whole industry is being turned, the facts are turning the industry up on its head. The reality of how dangerous this is so blatant. Now they're making these attempts to help us believe. They want to help us believe that nuclear just is not that harmful anymore. I mean, James. There's certain, I don't know, call it a certain personality type but I mean, the Mark Lombard, who is the NRC director of Spent Fuel Management Division at the NRC. Anything to do with storing and transporting spent fuel, that's nuclear waste, goes through him. And I worked, Mark Lombard, and I worked directly with him. And when he was in attendance at that meeting last July where I learned that these canisters can have stress corrosion cracks and they can't inspect them. And they can't repair them, and they have no plan in place for what to do if something goes wrong. Wow.
So, that was my first introduction to this issue, and you're able to ask questions at the end of the meeting. So I said, well, wait a minute, am I understanding this right? You have no way to inspect these? And I said, well, how long is it going to be before these leak, before these crack all the way through? I mean, assuming you ever figure out how to inspect them. How long does that take? And they go, it won't happen for at least 30 years. And I said, well, why is that? And they said, well, the canisters are going to be too hot, so the salt from the salt air won't dissolve and start the corrosion cracking process because the temperature's so high, any moisture will just, won't stay. And then, 30 years. Okay, so then I did some more research on my own, and what I found out is they did a kind of a surface look at a few canisters. They couldn't do an inspection, but what they did is they have a tool where they put through the air vents of the concrete overpack, and they took the temperature in certain locations on the canister that they could reach. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And they did that at Diablo Canyon, and then they also used a tool to try and scrape some surface dust off, some surface particles to see if there were any corrosive particles in there that could cause stainless steel to break the thing that makes stainless, break the film that makes it stainless, to these corrosive particles such as sulfites and salts. And the results of that I've managed to find online is the temperature was low enough in a 2-year-old canister. Oh. And they also found corrosive magnesium chloride salt on the canister.
And this is at Diablo Canyon.
This is at Diablo Canyon. It's in San Luis Obispo County in Central California.
Wow.
It's right along the coast.
Wow.
Almost, yeah. And we're in a similar, both Diablo and San Onofre are in a similar coastal environment to the Coburg plant. The Coburg plant gets onshore winds, surf, frequent fog, all the same conditions that can trigger that cracking, the stress corrosion cracking process to start.
So when the people at the NRC are confronted with this information, are they? I'm just astounded that they're so cavalier with the amount of, like, one of my recent, and I've really only recently gotten engaged in figuring out ways to stop the Columbia generating station, right? So when you told me that the ones up in CGS were put in 2002, that means they're 13 years old. The cracking starts 15 to 17 years.
The cracks can start earlier than that.
Wow.
Once the crack is there, it'll take about 16 years for it to go all the way through the wall. But the cracks can start sooner than that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I take it that these canisters cannot withstand earthquakes very easily, especially if they're slightly cracked, correct?
Well, I talked to Mark Lombard, and I emailed him and talked to him. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, given these problems, you can't find cracks. They could go through wall. Can't repair them, not monitoring. He goes, oh, Donna, you worry too much. They'll eventually figure it out before anything goes wrong.
Wow. They'll eventually figure it out. That's the hubris, isn't it, of the entire nuclear industry is, don't worry, folks, we'll figure it out before we kill the entire planet.
Yeah, and then I said, well, what about Hanford? We've got leaking radiation into the ground,
Right.
And they haven't been able to stop that. And what about WIP in New Mexico, this so-called flagship underground storage facility for low-level waste? Right. I mean, they have an exploding canister, and it's shut down the whole facility, It's contaminated everything. And what about Savannah River? They still have leaking radiation in the ground from their tanks that are leaking, Yeah. He says, oh, well, that's the Department of Energy. We're better than they are.
What?
That was his answer.
It is so astounding how cavalier they are about this information. It's almost as if, I read an article on my YouTube channel one time by Dr. Alvin Weinberg. He was a pro-nuclear physicist in the 1950s or so. And he came up during this article, it was in the 1970s. He basically said that now, since World War II, we have now created a bargain and created a class that call themselves the nuclear priesthood. Much like in the ancient times when the priesthood held all the information that safeguarded humanity, we now have what's considered a nuclear priesthood because we now recognize that the nuclear industry basically safeguards the safety of the entire planet in their hands. And he said the hubris with them is that they basically really believe that they are going to find a solution just in the nick of time. I mean, he basically, in his statements, basically said, look, we understand Dr. John Goffman has done extensive research and told us how the level of harm of being affected on children and women and babies and human life. He said, but, the fact is in the nuclear priesthood, we know that we'll be able to invent a solution to this before most of the planet gets really harmed. It is astounding the level of hubris and disregard for the harm they're currently doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I wish that they were right. I wish that they really could find solutions. But another example is the Union of Concerned Scientists, David Lombard. He's very concerned about the dangers of the spent fuel pools, and that is a serious problem. They've changed the way they store fuel, and they've eliminated some safety features, and it would be extremely dangerous if those pools lost water and the fuel was exposed to the air. Extremely dangerous. You could have an explosion, a fire that you couldn't put out. I mean, major, huge problem. And I agree with that. But David is willing to accept these thin canisters as a solution.
Why?
And this is
why?
Because we just need to get it out of the pools, and so he's willing to accept anything, and So he and I are having a kind of an email exchange right now, where he's giving me examples of why these are okay, but the examples he's giving me don't have anything to do with stainless steel. So we're right in the process of going back and forth, and I'm sending him documents and links. It would be really great if he and I could get on the same page, because Union Concerned Scientists has a major influence.
Yeah.
With our, the Democratic leadership in this country and every state, and with our regulators. They built a reputation as being experts. But on this issue, I think they have more to learn.
Yeah.
And
well, that's the interesting thing that you show us as citizens, is that we can educate the regulators and the scientists, like the people out there who are making these decisions, really honestly do not have all the information. They don't think it through.
Right, they don't. And the sad part is our regulators and our elected officials, they're relying on certain experts because, hey, we're not experts. We have to believe our experts and trust them. Well, when those experts are providing information that's not accurate, that really hurts us. So that's been a major challenge for me, because I'm not a material engineer or nuclear physicist. I work with material engineers and I work with nuclear physicists. But one of the things I found is when I find, say, a material engineer, and they vet my documents that I produce on these issues, they're not willing to speak out. They make their money from these industries. So they go on record. That could be a career killer for them.
Wow. Well, that sounds to me like the running theme here is the number one thing is anyone that's related to this industry that has any power or any pull or any influence at all basically are being coerced into silence because their livelihood is being threatened. And yet there's no sense of responsibility to humanity. Really, this industry needs to be shut down, and we need to just build a whole industry on learning to manage the waste and the harm that it's already caused. Like if we shut down every nuclear power plant today, shut down all the uranium processing plants today, we have hundreds of years of business that we could do just managing the problems that we've already caused.
Yeah, my concern here is, you don't really shut down a nuclear plant. You shut down the reactors.
Right. But
that nuclear waste, the dangerous part, it's still there and very active, and it will be for thousands of years.
Wow.
So I never use the terminology shutting down a nuclear plant. You shut down the reactor so you don't make any more of this stuff. But for me, the number one urgency is we need to stop using this inferior thin canister technology and do what most of the rest of the world does and use thick cast. I have urged the NRC to raise their standards.
So we can make comments at the NRC on this, correct?
Well, I mean...
Excuse me, Donna, we have 15 seconds. I just caught wind of the time. I apologize.
Okay. All right. Well, here's the thing. The NRC...
10 seconds. I'm going to thank you. We're about to be kicked off the air. I apologize.
Okay.
Thank you for coming.
Okay.
On.
All right.